The chief of police, trembling, watched his own officers approach, not to arrest the women, but to handcuff him. The humiliation was public, inescapable. The law, which he so often claimed to embody, had just turned against him, and the judge on the old motorcycle was its newest, most relentless enforcer. The heavy afternoon air seemed to vibrate with disbelief. The chief of police, once imposing and arrogant, was now a pathetic figure, his eyes wide, fixed on the handcuffs his own men were drawing. The cold metal, the dry click, was the melody of his end. Humiliation was a chilling cloak that enveloped him, thicker than morning mist. There was no escape. The law, which he used as a shield and sword for his own whims, turned against him with a silent fury, embodied in the serene figure of the judge on the old motorcycle. He felt the firm touch of the officers, the same ones who, minutes earlier, had awaited his orders to arrest the two women. Now, orders came from elsewhere, from an authority he never imagined he would encounter there, on the dusty, unassuming roadside. The chief of police tried to react, a flash of fury and denial crossing his face. "What is this? You can't do this. I am the chief of police." His voice, once thunderous, was now a hoarse whisper, almost inaudible under the weight of shame. But his men, once submissive, now seemed to have found a new moral compass. They looked at him with a mixture of shock and an almost palpable relief. The corruption, the abuse of power, were open secrets that now exploded into public view. The handcuffs clicked shut with a final snap, sealing his fate. The chief of police, who so enjoyed seeing despair in the eyes of others, now felt his own despair, raw and corrosive. The judge, still seated on the motorcycle, observed the scene with an almost unsettling calm. Her eyes, previously tired from the journey, now shone with the relentless light of justice. Beside her, the captain, her daughter, dismounted from the back. Her posture exuded unquestionable authority, her eyes sweeping the scene, assessing each officer, each movement. She didn't need to say a word, her presence was a command. "Chief of Police," the judge's voice echoed, soft yet sharp as a blade. "You abused your position, your authority. You attempted to coerce, extort, and unjustly arrest citizens. The law, Chief of Police, is not a toy in your dirty hands. It is a pillar, and whoever corrupts it falls with it." The Chief of Police tried to raise his head, a last vestige of wounded pride. "This is a mistake, a setup. I will." "You are going to the precinct," the captain intervened, her voice firm and allowing no room for argument. "Like any other detainee, and there you will have all the time in the world to reflect on your actions. Your rights will be read and your lawyer will be contacted, exactly as you should have done with anyone you apprehended." One of the officers, a young man with a pale face, approached the captain. "Captain, what are the orders?" "Take the chief of police to the precinct. Document his arrest in flagrante delicto for abuse of authority, extortion, and misrepresentation," the captain instructed, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell. "All procedures must be followed to the letter, and ensure he has no access to any phone or document until I arrive to supervise the process." The chief of police's humiliation reached its peak. Being handcuffed by his own men was one thing. Being instructed by a captain he had just tried to arrest was another. His mind raced, searching for an escape, a pretext, anything that could reverse that surreal situation. But there was nothing. Reality crushed him. He, the hunter, had become the hunted, and the prey he underestimated were the most dangerous of all. The officers, now with a renewed purpose, escorted the chief of police to one of the patrol cars. He stumbled, his steps uncertain, the once imposing figure now reduced to a broken man. The few curious onlookers gathered at a distance watched the scene in shock. Whispers and looks of astonishment accompanied the chief of police as he was pushed into the back seat of the patrol car, the same seat where so many victims of his arbitrariness had been thrown. The judge and the captain watched the car depart. The dust raised by the patrol car slowly settled, as if the air was finally cleansing itself of a stain. The captain turned to her mother, a slight smile of satisfaction on her lips. "Good thing you didn't forget your judge's ID, Mom. It was a perfect in flagrante arrest." The judge nodded, a glint of weariness and triumph in her eyes. Some men never learn that the law has no price, nor an old motorcycle that can prevent it from being enforced. Now, let's go. We have a process to oversee and a motorcycle to take home. The tension, which hung in the air like an invisible threat, began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of justice restored. But the judge knew that this was just the beginning. The downfall of a corrupt chief of police was a seismic event, and the shockwaves would spread throughout the entire system. The battle was far from over, but the first and most decisive victory had been won. There, on the roadside, under the relentless sun, by two women whom the law dared to underestimate. The road dust was still settling as the judge and the captain, now with the old motorcycle back in motion, followed the trail of the patrol cars. The silence that had settled was not one of peace, but of tense anticipation, like the air before a storm. The captain, at the helm, felt the weight of responsibility, but also a chilling satisfaction. Justice, for her, was not an abstract concept, but a tangible force, and seeing it act so directly was a balm for years of frustration with systemic corruption. The judge, on the back, kept her eyes fixed on the passing landscape, but her mind was already at the precinct, anticipating every step, every resistance, every attempt to subvert the process that was beginning. She knew that the downfall of a chief of police was not an isolated event. It was an earthquake whose aftershocks would be felt throughout the entire security and justice apparatus of that city. Upon arriving at the precinct, the scene was one of contained chaos. Uniformed officers gathered at the entrance, their faces a mixture of shock, curiosity, and in some poorly disguised fear. The patrol car with the handcuffed chief of police was already parked, and the sight of him being removed from the car by his own subordinates was a spectacle few would have dared to imagine. The chief of police, once a colossus of authority, now seemed shrunken, his shoulders slumped, his gaze evasive. He tried to maintain a pose of dignity, but shame was a poison that seeped through every pore of his skin. The captain dismounted from the motorcycle with the agility of someone accustomed to the battlefield. Her posture was a silent command, and the officers watching her felt the shift in the atmosphere. The judge, more slowly, dismounted, her presence emanating a different authority, more serene, yet equally unshakable. She didn't need a uniform to command respect. Her aura was the law itself. "Captain," one of the officers who had participated in the arrest stepped forward, his voice a little shaky. "The chief of police has been taken to the holding cell. He's demanding to speak with a lawyer and the Secretary of Public Safety." The captain nodded, her eyes sweeping the room. "He will have all his rights guaranteed, like any other detainee. But for now, he will not speak to anyone other than the officers responsible for documenting the incident. And I will be responsible for supervising that documentation." Her voice was firm, leaving no room for dispute. She turned to the judge. "Mom, would you like to go directly to the chief of police's office? We'll need a space to organize the next steps." The judge nodded. "Yes, daughter, and ask the chief clerk to report to us. We'll need him to formalize everything." As they walked through the precinct corridors, the silence was almost palpable. Officers moved aside, making way, their gazes fixed on the two women. This was no ordinary day. The hierarchy had been turned upside down, and uncertainty hung in the air. The chief of police's office, once a sanctuary of power and questionable decisions, now seemed cold and empty, awaiting new occupants, or perhaps a purification. The captain sat in the chief of police's chair, a symbolic gesture of control. The judge remained standing, observing the diplomas and commendations on the walls, each a reminder of the authority that had just been dismantled. The chief clerk, a middle-aged man with a weary demeanor, entered the room, visibly nervous. "Ladies," he began, adjusting his glasses. What is happening? The chief of police. Is he really arrested?" The captain looked at him, her voice serious. "Yes, Clark. The chief of police was arrested in flagrante delicto for abuse of authority, extortion, and misrepresentation. We need you to initiate the formal report of the incident with all details. And I want every step documented, every witness listed, every piece of evidence collected. There will be no room for errors or manipulations." The clerk swallowed hard. "But Captain, this is unprecedented. He is the chief of police, the system." The judge intervened, her voice soft, yet with an authority that made the clerk tremble. "The system, Clark, is designed to protect the law, not to cover for those who violate it. The chief of police, like any other citizen, is subject to the law. And as a judge, I guarantee that all procedures will be followed to the letter. Your role now is to ensure that justice is served without fear or favoritism. Any attempt at obstruction will be dealt with the severity the law allows." The mention of the judge and the clarity of her words dispelled any doubt the clerk might have had. He realized he was not dealing with a whim, but with the relentless force of the law. He nodded, his shoulders a little straighter. "Yes, Madam Judge. Yes, Captain. I will arrange everything immediately. The incident log, the witnesses, everything will be done according to the law." The captain watched the clerk leave, a slight tension still in her shoulders. "He's a good man, Mom. Just scared." "Many are, daughter," the judge replied, her gaze distant. "Fear is a powerful tool for corruption, but justice, when it finally manifests, can be even more powerful. The chief of police's downfall is just the first step. Now, we need to ensure that the roots he planted are also pulled out. The battle, as I said, is far from over. And the real challenge begins now, within these walls, where his power and influence may still try to operate." The two women knew that the precinct now was a minefield. Every officer, every employee represented a piece in a complex chess game. The chief of police's arrest was a shock, but resistance to change would come, subtle and insidious. The night would be long, and the fight for the integrity of that system was just beginning. They had overthrown the king, but the castle still stood, and its defenders, though shaken, had not been defeated. The night promised to be long. In the chief of police's office, now stripped of its aura of power, the judge and the captain prepared for the real battle. The in flagrante arrest was merely the prelude, the cleansing of the system, the true war. The captain, seated in the swivel chair, felt the weight of the leather beneath her hands, a reminder of the responsibility that now rested on her shoulders. The judge beside her leafed through a stack of documents, her mind already mapping out legal strategies. The chief clerk returned, accompanied by two other clerks, all with tense expressions. News of the chief of police's arrest had spread like wildfire, and the air in the precinct was charged with uncertainty and fear. "Ladies," the chief clerk began, his voice a little firmer now, but still with a noticeable tremor, "we've started the report. The chief of police is in the holding cell, and he's unyielding. He demands a phone, insists he has the right to call the Secretary of Public Safety and his lawyer immediately." The captain raised her eyes, her expression unshakable. "He will have his rights, Clark, but not now. The in flagrante report is the priority, and until it is completed, and I personally review it, he will not have access to external communications. It's standard procedure to prevent contamination of evidence or coercion of witnesses. Make sure all phones near his cell are deactivated or under surveillance." the judge added, without taking her eyes off the papers. And any attempt at contact by him or by third parties on his behalf must be recorded. Every detail is crucial for the integrity of the process. The clerks nodded, the gravity of the words echoing in the room. The captain then proceeded to give more specific instructions. I want you to pull all incident reports from the last 6 months involving vehicle seizures, especially motorcycles. And, more importantly, I want a list of all cases where vehicles or individuals were released after the Chief of Police's direct intervention, without due legal process or complete documentation. One of the clerks choked. Captain, this could take days, and many of these records are sensitive. The captain stared at him, her eyes conveying a cold determination. We don't have days. We have tonight, and there is nothing more sensitive than the corruption that allows criminals to walk free and honest citizens to be oppressed. If you need more personnel, call them in. If you encounter any resistance or attempt at obstruction, inform me immediately. And Chief Clerk, I want you to personally supervise every step. Your reputation and that of everyone here depends on the transparency and legality of this process. The judge finally closed the document she was reading and turned to the clerks. The law is clear. Obstruction of justice is a serious crime. And, at this moment, the integrity of this precinct is under scrutiny. We will not allow the shadow of one man to corrupt all your work. Do what is right. Duty. The combined authority of the two women was overwhelming. The clerks, though visibly apprehensive, left the room with a new sense of purpose. The bureaucratic machine began to move, but not without friction. As the night progressed, the first signs of the castle's resistance began to emerge. Incomplete reports, mysteriously missing files, computer systems that suddenly malfunctioned. The captain, anticipating such maneuvers, had instructed her own trusted men, the few she fully relied on, to monitor the systems and assist in the search for documents. "Mom," the captain said, a tone of barely contained frustration in her voice, as she examined a vehicle seizure report that seemed conveniently vague. "It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is on fire and someone is throwing more hay on it." The judge smiled faintly, a tired but firm smile. "That's exactly how they operate, daughter. They create a labyrinth of bureaucracy and misinformation to hide their tracks, but the truth has a way of manifesting itself. We need patience and a very powerful magnifying glass." Suddenly, one of the captain's trusted officers entered the room, his face serious. "Captain, Judge, we received a call. It's from the Secretary of Public Safety's office. He's demanding to speak with the Chief of Police immediately and is questioning the legality of his arrest." The tension in the room escalated. It was the castle's first major offensive. The captain picked up the phone, her posture stiffening. "You can put the call through to me and record everything." As the captain spoke on the phone, her voice calm but laden with authority, the judge watched, her mind already formulating legal responses to any attempt at interference. She knew the Secretary of Public Safety was a political ally of the Chief of Police, and his intervention was expected, but it would not be tolerated. "Mr. Secretary," the captain said, her voice resonating in the room, "the Chief of Police was arrested in flagrante delicto for abuse of authority, extortion, and misrepresentation. The arrest was properly formalized and supervised by me and Judge Helena. All legal procedures are being followed to the letter. Any attempt to interfere with the process will be considered obstruction of justice and will be treated with due severity. I suggest that, before questioning the legality, you inform yourself about the facts and the federal constitution." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and the judge imagined the secretary's surprise and fury. The captain continued, allowing no room for argument. "I would like to remind you, Secretary, that the law is for everyone, and the integrity of public safety institutions is non-negotiable. Have a good night." The captain hung up the phone, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. "He didn't like that very much, Mom, but the message was delivered." The judge nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "That was a good move, daughter, but this is just the beginning. They will try everything. Now, we need to anticipate. There is a network of complicity that sustains men like the chief of police. We need to unravel it, piece by piece, and the first piece lies in the records the clerk is searching for. Those that were forgotten or misplaced are the ones that will give us the most valuable clues." The night continued, and the precinct, once a bastion of the chief of police's authority, now transformed into a silent battlefield, where law and corruption waged a relentless duel. The judge and the captain, two unshakable women, were ready for the long and arduous journey ahead, aware that every recovered document and every protected witness was a step towards the purification of the system. The castle was shaken, but still standing, and its defenders, though rattled, had not been defeated. The line went dead, but the echo of the captain's voice still resonated in the room, a veiled declaration of war against the established power. The judge nodded, a glint of approval in her eyes. "Well put, daughter. Surprise is a powerful weapon, but now they will be on high alert. The resistance won't just be passive, it could become active." No sooner had the judge finished speaking than the chief clerk returned, his face pale and sweaty. He wasn't alone. The other two clerks followed him, their gazes fixed on the floor, avoiding eye contact. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, charged with palpable tension. "Ladies," the chief clerk began, his voice a hoarse whisper, "we're facing difficulties. Many of the vehicle seizure records from the past few months are incomplete. Missing dates, vague descriptions, illegible signatures, and in at least a dozen cases the physical files have simply disappeared from the cabinets." He gestured with trembling hands. "The computer systems are also slow, with database errors preventing access to older information. It's as if a fog has descended upon the records." The captain pressed her lips together, her jaw hardening. "A convenient fog, wouldn't you say, Clark? This isn't an accident. It's a coordinated operation to cover tracks. Who's on duty in IT tonight?" One of the younger clerks, who had remained silent until then, looked up. "It's Sergeant Almeida, Captain. But he said he's having problems with the main server and can't fix it alone. He'd need an external technician." The captain scoffed. "Sergeant Almeida, the same one who was always loyal to the chief of police and who conveniently has main server problems right now. Send him here, and I want Agent Silva and Agent Costa, my trusted people, to take over the IT room. They have full authority to restore systems, access backups, and if necessary, isolate any machine that is being tampered with. Any resistance will be treated as obstruction." The clerks nodded, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. The judge watched, her mind already processing the legal implications of each maneuver. "Captain, while your people handle the technical side, focus on the physical records. Those that are incomplete or vague can be as revealing as those that disappeared. Look for patterns, the same vehicle owner names repeating, bail amounts or release fees that seem arbitrary, or the absence of payment documentation." The chief clerk, encouraged by the clarity of the instructions, added, "There was a case, Madam Judge, of a motorcycle seized about 2 months ago. An old Honda. The owner, a delivery driver, insisted he had paid all the fees for its release, but the vehicle was never returned. The chief of police said he was making it up and that the vehicle had been recovered in another operation, but there was never any record of that other operation." The captain and the judge exchanged a look. "An old Honda, you said?" the captain asked, a flicker of recognition in her voice. "Check for any photographic records or more detailed descriptions. And, Clark, try to locate the owner, that delivery driver. He could be a crucial witness. As the clerks hurried to follow the new orders, Sergeant Almeida, a corpulent man with a grizzled mustache, entered the room. His face twisted into an expression of feigned concern. "Captain Judge, I was informed you needed me. The server, as I said, is having serious problems. I can't access the system logs." The captain stared at him, her eyes like ice. "Sergeant Almeida, don't worry about the logs. Agent Silva and Agent Costa will take over IT. Your role from now on is to assist the chief clerk in searching for the physical records. And I guarantee that if a single document is lost or damaged under your supervision, the consequences will be severe." Sergeant Almeida paled, his feigned concern giving way to genuine fear. He knew he was being disarmed, his loyalty to the chief of police now a liability. He nodded, speechless, and left the room, his footsteps heavy. Moments later, Agent Silva, a young officer with remarkable IT skills, entered the room, a tablet in hand and a contained smile on his face. "Captain Judge, Sergeant Almeida wasn't having server problems. He was executing a mass deletion script for log files and seizure records. We managed to stop it in time and are already recovering the backups. But we found something more interesting." He slid the tablet to the captain and the judge. On the screen, a complex spreadsheet opened with columns for dates, names, vehicle types, and values. "This is a parallel record, hidden in an encrypted directory. It's not part of the official system. It seems to be the chief of police's personal ledger. And look here, Honda CG 150, red 2008, owner, Jose da Silva, release value, $3,000. Status, retained for operational use by the chief of police. The seizure date matches what the clerk mentioned." The judge took the tablet, her eyes quickly scanning the spreadsheet. "Operational use? That's a euphemism for theft, daughter, and the release value. That's blatant extortion. This parallel record is the proof we needed of the extent of the corruption network. It's not just the chief of police. There are other names here, other vehicles, other fees, and operational uses." The captain felt a chill. The spreadsheet wasn't just a list of crimes. It was a map of the spiderweb the chief of police had woven. "Agent Silva, I want you and Agent Costa to do a complete sweep of all computers in the precinct. Look for other hidden files, for any internal communication that mentions these operational uses or special fees. And most importantly, cross-reference this data with the bank records of the chief of police and his associates, if we can access them." "We're already working on it, Captain," Agent Silva replied, his eyes shining with the thrill of the hunt. It seems the chief of police had a network of contacts that facilitated the sale of these retained vehicles, or the collection of these fees. The judge closed her eyes for a moment, the image of her daughter's old motorcycle and the chief of police's face mingling in her mind. "It's more than that, Agent. It's an institutionalized extortion system. The chief of police's downfall is just the tip of the iceberg. This spreadsheet is the key to unraveling the structure that sustained him. We need every name, every date, every value. Each one is a thread that will lead us to another knot in the web." The night advanced, and the precinct, once a labyrinth of obstruction, began to reveal its darkest secrets. The captain and the judge, armed with new and powerful evidence, felt that the real battle was just beginning. The castle was crumbling, but the deep foundations of corruption still needed to be exposed and eradicated. The fight would be long and arduous, but the truth finally began to emerge from the shadows. The tablet screen, once a portal to curiosity, was now a mirror of the deepest depravity. The spreadsheet, a cold and calculating record, revealed the extent of a spiderweb that the chief of police had not woven alone. The judge and the captain, side by side, absorbed every line, every name, every value. Jose da Silva's red 2008 Honda CG150 was just one of many threads, but a thread that connected the system's cruelty to the life of an ordinary man, a tangible link between the crime and its victims. Agent Silva, this spreadsheet is pure gold, the captain declared, her voice low but charged with an intensity that made the other agents in the room flinch, feeling the weight of the discovery. Every entry here is a crime. Every operational use is blatant theft. Every arbitrary release fee is extortion. I want you and Agent Costa to start cross-referencing these names with vehicle ownership records, with ticketing systems, with any database we can access. We need to identify the straw men, the fences, the intermediaries, and of course the ultimate beneficiaries of this criminal network. Agent Silva nodded, his fingers already dancing across the tablet, opening new windows and executing commands with the agility of a hacker. We're already scanning the IT computers, Captain. We found a few more hidden files, and they point to a network of mechanic shops and chop shops that seem to have an agreement with the Chief of Police to dismantle or resell these seized vehicles. Some of the names in these shops appear on the spreadsheet, associated with maintenance services for the retained vehicles, an obvious euphemism for tampering or dismantling. The judge, with her sharp legal mind, intervened, the gravity of the situation clearly etched on her face. This isn't just corruption, daughter. It's a fully operational criminal organization. Extortion, embezzlement, racketeering. And the way these vehicles were dismantled or resold could indicate large-scale money laundering. We need irrefutable proof for each of these links. Agent Silva, prioritize the recovery of any communication, emails, messages, audio, that can link the Chief of Police to these other individuals and companies. And check for records of suspicious financial transactions between them, any flow of money that cannot be justified. As Agent Silva delved into the complexity of the digital data, the captain turned to the chief clerk, who observed the scene with a mixture of relief at finally seeing the truth emerge and dread at the consequences. Clark, what do you know about these shops? Are any of them known for illegal activities? Does any owner have a criminal history that the Chief of Police conveniently ignored? The chief clerk hesitated for a moment, then, as if an invisible barrier had broken, began to speak, his voice gaining strength. Yes, Captain, Zay's Mechanics and Guto's Auto Parts are well known in the region. For years, rumors have circulated that they operate with stolen parts and tampered vehicles, but the Chief of Police always protected them. Any complaint was filed away. Any investigation was suppressed. The owners, Zay and Guto, are figures known for their closeness to the Chief of Police. They frequented the precinct as if it were their own home. The captain felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The extent of the rot was even greater than she imagined, deeply rooted in the community. That explains a lot. I want search and seizure warrants for these two shops, and for the owners' residences. We need to act fast before they have time to destroy evidence or flee. Prepare the documentation, Clark, and I want a team ready to go, armed and with backup, because we don't know what we'll find. No sooner had the captain finished speaking than her phone rang. It was an unknown number, without identification. She answered, her gaze fixed on the judge, a dark premonition hanging in the air. Captain Beatrice, she said, her voice firm without faltering. On the other end of the line, a voice distorted by an electronic modifier replied, cold and calculating. The captain is playing with fire. The Chief of Police is just a pawn. There are much larger forces at play, with deep roots and long tentacles. If you keep digging, you'll get burned. And your mother, too. Don't think you're safe. A shiver ran down the captain's spine, but she didn't show it, maintaining her composure. Who is this? And what are these threats? Identify yourself. Consider it a warning. The voice continued, a chilling tone that promised danger. The network is vast, and it has eyes and ears everywhere, even where you least expect it. If the chief of police falls, others will fall, and we won't allow that. Think carefully before taking the next step, because the consequences will be irreversible. The call ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in the room. The captain hung up the phone, her face a mask of contained fury, her eyes flashing. "Mom, we received a warning, a distorted voice, threatening both of us. They said the chief of police is just a pawn and that there are larger forces at play who will not allow the investigation to proceed." The judge, who had observed the conversation, her expression serious, nodded slowly, unsurprised. "It was to be expected, daughter. The network is feeling the net close in. This means we're on the right track, that we've hit a raw nerve. But it also means the danger is real and imminent. They won't hesitate to use more aggressive, more desperate tactics." She looked at Agent Silva, her voice gaining renewed urgency. "Agent, in addition to the data you've already requested, I want you to sweep for any surveillance or listening activity in the precinct, and reinforce external security immediately. No one enters or leaves without being identified and searched. The safety of everyone here is top priority." Agent Silva, realizing the gravity of the situation, nodded seriously. "Understood, Judge. I'm already activating the security team for more intense patrols and perimeter checks, with attention to any suspicious movement, and I'll start the electronic countermeasures sweep right now." The captain, with adrenaline coursing through her veins, felt a new sense of urgency, an unshakable determination. "Mom, what do we do with the warning? Ignore it? Or use it to our advantage?" "No, daughter. We don't ignore it, but we also don't let it intimidate us," the judge replied, her voice calm, but with an unshakable authority that echoed in the room. "This is an attempt to destabilize, to make us retreat out of fear. But we will do the exact opposite. Threats like this only confirm that we are close to something big, to dismantling a powerful structure. We need to tighten the net, expedite the warrants for the shops, and I want Jose da Silva, the Honda owner, located and brought here under police protection. He is a key witness and now a potential target, and his safety is crucial to our investigation." The night at the precinct had transformed into a high-stakes chess game, where every move was calculated and every piece of information a valuable asset. The judge and the captain, now aware of the depth of the conspiracy and the imminence of violent retaliation, were more determined than ever. The truth, like an underground river, was breaking through the surface, and the torrent that would follow promised to sweep away the foundations of corruption. The fight, which seemed to have just begun, was about to enter its most dangerous phase, where the line between justice and peril became increasingly thin. The castle now was not just shaken, it was under direct attack, and its hidden defenders were beginning to show their claws, ready to fight to the end. The silence that followed the abrupt call was more deafening than any scream. Adrenaline pulsed through the captain's veins, but her expression remained an impenetrable fortress. The judge, beside her, radiated a calculated calm, her mind already charting the next moves on a chessboard where life and justice were the pieces. "Agent Silva, top priority for the sweep," the judge ordered, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "I want every corner of this precinct inspected. Phones, computers, meeting rooms, even the fleet vehicles. No loophole can be left. And external security must be tripled. Constant patrols, rigorous access control. No one enters or leaves without identification and express authorization. From now on, this precinct is a fortress." Agent Silva, with seriousness etched on his face, was already activating his team. "Understood, Judge. The electronic countermeasures team is already en route. In minutes, we'll have a complete sweep." And external patrols have already been reinforced. Every agent is aware of the gravity of the situation. As the precinct transformed into a stronghold of surveillance, the captain turned to her mother. "Mom, Jose da Silva. He's the most vulnerable piece now. We need to find him before they do." The judge nodded, her eyes fixed on the tablet screen, where the spreadsheet still gleamed with the coldness of numbers and names. "Exactly, daughter. He is the living proof, the voice that can give face and history to these crimes." "Agent Silva, what is Jose da Silva's last known address, and are there any records of recent contact?" Agent Silva, with the agility of a digital predator, typed quickly. "Jose da Silva, owner of the Honda CG 150, resides in a peripheral neighborhood. His last recorded contact with the precinct was 3 days ago, when he tried to recover his motorcycle and was, apparently, dissuaded by the chief of police. There are no records of criminal history. He's an ordinary worker. An ordinary worker whose life was turned upside down by a corrupt system," the captain murmured, rage bubbling beneath her calm surface. "I want a search and protection team immediately, discreet but effective. We cannot alert whoever is watching us, bring him here safely, and ensure no one follows him." The search team, led by an experienced sergeant, was dispatched in unmarked vehicles. The tension in the room was palpable, each minute feeling like an eternity. The threat, once a distant voice, now seemed to hang over each of them, a chilling reminder of the vastness of the network they were about to dismantle. Meanwhile, the chief clerk, visibly shaken but with a new determination, worked feverishly on the search and seizure warrants for Zay's Mechanics and Guto's auto parts. "The warrants are almost ready, Captain. The documentation is being reviewed. We just need the judge's signature." The judge, without hesitation, picked up the pen. "When they're ready, I'll sign them. But I want the raid teams to be prepared for the worst. These places aren't just workshops, they're centers of criminal operations. Expect resistance, expect attempts to destroy evidence. And I want every item seized to be meticulously catalogued and photographed. Nothing can be left to chance." The captain looked at Agent Silva. "Agent, while we await the return of Jose da Silva's team and the finalization of the warrants, continue to scour the digital files. Is there anything else that can give us an advantage? Any name that repeats? Any unusual transaction?" Agent Silva, immersed in his work, responded without taking his eyes off the screen. "Captain, I'm cross-referencing the names on the spreadsheet with Shell Company records. I found an interesting pattern. Several seemingly legitimate transport and logistics companies appear as service providers for these shops, and in some cases for the precinct itself, with invoices that seem inflated or for services that aren't justified. And the most intriguing thing, the owners of these companies have family or business ties to local political figures." A shiver ran down the captain's spine. Political figures. This is even bigger than we thought. That explains the protection, the impunity. Agent, prioritize these connections. We need a complete map of this web, from the chief of police to the highest echelons. The judge, listening attentively, intervened. "This is crucial, Agent. Institutionalized corruption is not sustained by just one chief of police. It needs support and protection at higher levels. If we can link these shell companies to politicians, we'll have proof of the criminal organization in its entirety. But we need irrefutable evidence, bank transactions, emails, recordings, anything that creates an unbreakable link." Time seemed to stretch and shrink simultaneously. Each new discovery opened a new door, but also revealed an even deeper abyss of illegality. The veiled threat from the phone call now made perfect sense. They weren't just unraveling an extortion scheme. They were poking a much larger hornet's nest, with tentacles that extended far beyond the walls of that precinct. Suddenly, Agent Silva's radio crackled. Team Alpha to base. We have visual contact with the target, Jose da Silva. He is at his residence, appears agitated but unharmed. We are approaching to make contact and ensure his safety. Repeat, target unharmed. A collective sigh of relief, almost inaudible, echoed in the room. The captain felt a knot in her stomach loosen slightly. At least one piece of the puzzle was safe, for now, but the battle was far from over. Jose da Silva's arrival would be just the next chapter in a night that promised to be long and dangerous, a night where truth fought to emerge from the densest shadows. The castle of corruption was now under full siege, and its hidden defenders, already revealing their claws, were about to feel the weight of justice. Agent Silva's radio crackled again, the voice of the Alpha Team Sergeant now closer, more urgent. Base Alpha, target secure. We're en route to the precinct. Clear traffic, no incidents. Estimated arrival, 15 minutes. A faint, almost imperceptible relief swept through the room. The judge and the captain exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement that for now a small victory had been achieved. Jose da Silva was safe. Agent Silva, prepare a secure room for him. No one, absolutely no one, will have access to Jose da Silva without my express permission or the captain's, the judge instructed, her voice firm. He is a protected witness, and reinforce the security of the interrogation room. I want it monitored 24 hours a day. As the minutes dragged on, the tension in the precinct was almost palpable. Every creak, every shadow cast by the fluorescent lights seemed to carry a weight of imminent danger. Agent Silva, with the efficiency of a digital maestro, continued his relentless search through the files, the computer screen a kaleidoscope of data, names, and transactions. "Captain, Judge," he called out without looking away. "I found something. The transport and logistics companies I mentioned, the ones with inflated invoices with the workshops and the precinct itself. The owners aren't just linked to local politicians. One of them, a company called Eagle Transport Limited, is owned by a first cousin of Councilman Ricardo Mendez, and Rapid Logistics Inc. has the brother of the Secretary of Public Works, Dr. Almeida, as its majority shareholder. Both are influential figures in the City Hall." The revelation hit the captain like an electric shock. Councilman and Secretary. This is a much deeper level of infiltration than we imagined. It's not just a corrupt chief of police. It's a web that extends to the heart of the municipal administration. That explains the audacity, the impunity. The judge, though not surprised, felt the gravity of the situation intensify. "This confirms our suspicions, Agent. Corruption is not an isolated act, but a system. We need concrete evidence linking these companies and individuals directly to the Chief of Police's crimes and the motorcycle scheme. Bank transactions, emails, communication records, anything that creates an unbreakable link." The chief clerk, with a stack of papers in hand, approached. "Judge, Captain, the search and seizure warrants for Zay's Mechanics and Guto's Auto Parts are ready, reviewed and in order. We just need your signature, Judge." The judge picked up the pen without hesitation, her signature a firm stroke of authority. "Captain, prepare the raid teams. I want them in pairs, one for each location. Maximum caution. Expect resistance and attempts to destroy evidence, and every item seized must be catalogued, photographed, and sealed with forensic rigor. Nothing can be left to chance. Agent Silva, do you have any information about the structure of these locations? Blueprints, number of employees, possible escape routes?" Agent Silva, already anticipating the question, projected aerial images and floor plans of the two establishments. Zay's Mechanics is an older structure with several annexes and an internal courtyard. Guto's Auto Parts is a larger warehouse with a second floor that appears to be an office. There are potential escape routes through the back in both cases. My intelligence team has already done a preliminary survey. I suggest a simultaneous approach to minimize the chance of communication between them. The captain nodded, her military mind already charting the strategy. Simultaneous approach. Containment teams on the escape routes. No one leaves, no one enters, and I want a liaison officer on each team, reporting directly to me. At that instant, the sound of tires screeching on the street and the discreet siren of an unmarked vehicle announced their arrival. Jose da Silva was there. Team Alpha escorted him through a side entrance, away from curious glances, directly to the prepared, secure room. He looked like a man who had been through a storm, his eyes wide, his body tense, but with a glimpse of relief upon seeing the judge and the captain. "Mr. Jose da Silva, I am Judge Helena, and this is my daughter, Captain Beatriz," the judge said, her voice calm and welcoming. "You are safe here. No one will hurt you. We need your help to unravel a major corruption scheme. Can you tell us what happened?" Jose, a simple, hard-working man, sat down, his hands trembling slightly. "I just wanted my motorcycle back, Judge. I worked so hard to buy it. The chief of police. He threatened me, said I'd regret it if I kept insisting, that I'd lose much more than the motorcycle." His voice was a thread of fear, but also of contained anger. "He said the motorcycle was in custody, but I saw it at Zay's shop, completely dismantled. And there were others there, a bunch of motorcycles that looked new but had no plates. Nothing." The captain intervened, her voice softer than usual. "Mr. Jose, do you remember anything else? Any names, any conversations you overheard, anything that seemed strange?" Jose closed his eyes, trying to pull from memory the details that fear had tried to erase. There was a truck, Judge, a big truck with an eagle logo on the side. It always stopped there at Zay's Mechanics, and the guys would unload some big heavy boxes. And once I heard Zay talking on the phone about the cargo and Ricardo. I don't know who this Ricardo is, but Zay seemed scared of him. A shiver ran down the captain's spine. Eagle Transport Limited. And Ricardo. The piece fit perfectly with Agent Silva's discovery about Councilman Ricardo Mendez. The web was becoming visible, its threads connecting the chief of police, the workshops, the shell companies, and now influential political figures. "Mr. Jose, your information is crucial. You are the living proof of all this," the judge affirmed, her voice charged with new determination. "We will protect you and your family, and we will ensure that justice is served." Meanwhile, the raid teams, armed with warrants and a tactical plan, were already en route to Zay's Mechanics and Guto's Auto Parts. The night advanced, but the darkness would not be able to hide the truth for much longer. The castle of corruption, once an impenetrable fortress, was now under attack on multiple fronts, and the cries of its hidden defenders began to echo, desperate, as the light of justice threatened to expose each of its darkest secrets. The battle was far from over, but the tide was beginning to turn. The night deepened, dense and charged with an almost palpable electricity. At the precinct, the command room was an epicenter of contained adrenaline. Every click of Agent Silva's keyboard, every crackle of the radio seemed amplified, a harbinger of what was to come. Judge Helena and Captain Beatrice, side by side, watched the monitors, their hearts beating to the accelerated rhythm of the imminent mission. Outside, on the dark streets, the raid teams moved like shadows, the silence broken only by the muffled engine of unmarked vehicles. The voice of the Delta Team Sergeant broke the silence on the radio. "Base Delta, position, Zay's Mechanics under surveillance, all quiet, awaiting signal for approach." Almost immediately, Team Gamma responded. "Base, Gamma, Guto's Auto Parts in view. No apparent movement. Ready to advance." The captain, with a firm nod, gave the order. "Delta and Gamma, you may proceed. Remember, maximum caution, full containment of escape routes. No one enters, no one leaves." Seconds stretched into an eternity. Agent Silva's screen flickered with data, but his eyes were fixed on the tactical map, where team icons moved towards the targets. The judge pressed her lips together, the tension visible on her face. She knew that, from that moment on, the operation was entering its most critical and dangerous phase. Suddenly the radio crackled again, the Delta sergeant's voice now more urgent. "Base, Delta, we're in. Back gate breached. Location appears empty, but... Wait. We have an individual attempting to flee out the side. Containment team in pursuit." A chill ran down the captain's spine. "Don't let him destroy anything. Capture him and ensure the integrity of the evidence." As the pursuit unfolded at Zay's Mechanics, Team Gamma reported, "Base Gamma, main entrance forced. The warehouse is dark. Turning on the lights. Holy cow. It's a motorcycle graveyard, parts everywhere, and... Captain, we found a safe and a computer turned on." The sergeant's voice was charged with a mixture of shock and excitement. At Zay's Mechanics, the Delta sergeant reported, "Individual contained, Captain. It's Zay himself. He tried to throw an external hard drive into an oil barrel. We recovered the hard drive. And, Captain, we found Mr. Jose da Silva's motorcycle, dismantled, but the serial numbers match. And there are others, many others, some with altered plates, others without identification. And a notebook. It looks like a ledger with suspicious sales and purchase notes." The judge and the captain exchanged a look of contained triumph. The pieces fit with terrifying precision. Jose's motorcycle, the ledger, the external hard drive. It was the physical proof they needed to corroborate the testimony and digital discoveries. Meanwhile, Agent Silva, with the agility of an experienced hacker, was already accessing the recovered hard drive from Zay's Mechanics. "Captain Judge, this hard drive is a treasure. Inventory control spreadsheets, work orders, emails, and an encrypted folder. I'm working on it." From Guto's Auto Parts, Team Gamma continued to report. "Base Gamma, the safe is open. We found a considerable amount of cash and documents, many documents, invoices from Eagle Transport Ltd. And Rapid Logistics Inc. with absurdly inflated values for parts that don't seem to exist. And, Captain, we found a communication record, emails exchanged between Guto and an email address that appears to belong to Councilman Ricardo Mendes. The messages talk about special shipments and advance payments." The revelation hit the command room like lightning. The unbreakable link the judge had sought was there, materialized in paper and bits of information. Councilman Ricardo Mendes was not just a contact. He was an integral part of the scheme. Agent Silva, prioritize those emails. We need all communications between Guto and the councilman, and check for any mention of the Secretary of Public Works, Dr. Almeida, the judge ordered, her voice now a steel thread. The captain, in turn, was in direct contact with the teams, ensuring that every item was catalogued and sealed with utmost forensic precision. "Sergeants, I want every screw, every document, every line of code. Nothing can be lost. The chain of custody is vital." Jose da Silva, listening from his secure room, felt a mixture of relief and righteous anger growing in his chest. His motorcycle, the symbol of his labor and dignity, was there, dismantled but recovered, and those responsible, those who had threatened and robbed him, were being exposed. Agent Silva, with a triumphant smile, announced, "I got it. Zay's encrypted hard drive folder, these are payment records, regular cash payments to a bank account in the name of Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo. And there's a commission column for each missing or recovered motorcycle. The amounts are exorbitant, and there's more, a list of names, motorcycle owners' names, with notes about problems or resistance. Mr. Jose da Silva's name is here, with the note, insistent." The image of Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo, with his cynical smile and arrogance, lingered in the judge's mind. He had underestimated the force of justice, the determination of a mother and a daughter. The castle of corruption, once an impenetrable fortress, was crumbling brick by brick. The cries of its hidden defenders began to echo, no longer as veiled threats, but as moans of despair. The tide had turned. The night, which promised to be long and dangerous, was revealing the truth in its densest shadows, and the light of justice, merciless and relentless, was about to bathe each of the darkest secrets. The battle was far from over, but victory now was not just a distant hope. It was an increasingly palpable certainty. The revelation of Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo's name, emblazoned on the payment spreadsheets, and the list of insistence echoed in the command room like thunder. It was no longer a veiled suspicion, but a brutal certainty, coldly calculated in every cent of commission. Judge Helena felt a shiver run down her spine, not of fear, but of contained fury. That man, who had dared to arrest her and her daughter, was the epicenter of a web of corruption that was now unraveling in its entirety. "Agent Silva," the judge's voice was a steel thread, "I want a complete report of all transactions from Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo's account. Cross-reference that with the invoices from Eagle Transport Ltd. and Rapid Logistics Inc. I want to know how he's laundering this money and who else is involved in this flow." Captain Beatrice, her jaw clenched, was in direct contact with the raid teams. "Sergeant Delta, Sergeant Gamma, listen carefully. The priority now is to find any evidence that directly links Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo to these locations. Phones, diaries, personal documents, anything he might have left behind or that Zay and Guto might have kept for him. And look for any mention of Councilman Ricardo Mendez or the Secretary of Public Works, Dr. Almeida. Every detail matters. Jose da Silva, in the secure room, listened to every word, every discovery. The anger he felt towards the Chief of Police, once a smoldering fire, now blazed. His motorcycle, his sweat, his dignity, everything had been stolen by that man. But now the hope of justice was a balm, and he felt renewed strength to testify, to expose the truth. He was no longer just a victim, he was a fundamental piece in the downfall of an empire. At Zay's Mechanics, the Delta team, after containing the owner, scoured every corner. The sergeant reported, "Base, Delta, we found a prepaid cell phone hidden under a pile of tires. It appears to be a burner phone, and in the contacts, only one saved as boss. There are several text messages with instructions about deliveries and collections. And a recent message, be careful, things got tight, get rid of everything." A shiver ran through the command room. Boss. Could it be the Chief of Police, or someone above him? Agent Silva prioritized that cell phone, try to trace the number if possible, and see if there's any correspondence with Councilman Ricardo Mendez's contacts, the captain ordered, her voice laden with urgency. Meanwhile, at Guto's Auto Parts, Team Gamma made an even more disturbing discovery. "Base, Gamma, we found a secret compartment behind a false shelf. Inside, not just more cash, but an encrypted laptop and a folder with documents. These are copies of bidding contracts. And, Captain, the contracts are for Public Works, and the name of Dr. Almeida, Secretary of Public Works, appears as a signatory on several of them. And there are handwritten notes next to the values with percentages and the acronym CEP. CEP. Taquito, Chief of Police, Carlos Eduardo. The connection was undeniable, and now it extended to the Secretary of Public Works. The scheme wasn't just about stolen motorcycles. It was an intricate network of public fund embezzlement, money laundering, and corruption at various levels of the administration. Agent Silva, his fingers flying across the keyboard, was already working on the prepaid cell phone. "Captain Judge, the boss number on Zay's phone. It was used to make calls to a number registered in the name of a shell company, Alpha Consulting Services. And guess who owns that company? Councilman Ricardo Mendez. And there are records of calls to Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo's personal cell phone, though less frequently." Judge Helena closed her eyes for an instant, absorbing the magnitude of the discovery. Councilman Ricardo Mendez was not just a link, he was an orchestrator, using shell companies to launder money diverted from public works, with the complicity of the Secretary of Public Works and the Chief of Police's protection. Agent Silva, access Guto's laptop, we need everything on it, and cross-reference the bidding contract data with the movements in the Chief of Police's and the Councilman's accounts. I want a complete map of this financial network. Captain Beatriz, in turn, had her gaze fixed on the tactical map, where the targets connected in a sinister web. Sergeant Delta, Sergeant Gamma, maintain containment. No one enters, no one leaves. And prepare for the next phase. We need a search and seizure team for the residences of Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo and Councilman Ricardo Mendez, and arrest warrants for both. Their castle is crumbling, and the fall will be noisy. The night advanced, but the darkness would not be able to hide the truth for much longer. The cries of the hidden defenders, once moans of despair, now transformed into a terrified silence, as the light of justice, merciless and relentless, threatened to expose each of their darkest secrets. The battle was far from over, but victory now was not just a distant hope. It was an increasingly palpable certainty, a bittersweet taste in the mouths of the judge and the captain. Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo would be confronted, not just with the law, but with the silent fury of two women he had fatally underestimated. The command room buzzed with electrical energy, the tension palpable in the air. The revelation of Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo's name and the subsequent link to Councilman Ricardo Mendez and the Secretary of Public Works, Dr. Almeida, had transformed the operation from a search for justice into a relentless hunt. Judge Helena, her eyes fixed on the tactical map, felt the weight of responsibility, but also a cold, calculated fury. That man, who had dared to challenge and humiliate her, was about to reap what he had sown. Agent Silva, the judge's voice cut through the silence, prepare arrest warrants for Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo and Councilman Ricardo Mendez. Also include search and seizure warrants for their residences and offices. I want everything ready to be signed in 5 minutes. Captain Beatriz, beside the judge, was in direct contact with the teams. Sergeant Delta, Sergeant Gamma, prepare yourselves. The targets are Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo and Councilman Ricardo Mendez. I want tactical teams ready for immediate raid. Remember, they are dangerous and may be armed. Priority is team safety and evidence integrity. José da Silva, in the secure room, watched everything through the monitor. His tear-filled eyes reflected a mixture of relief and a thirst for justice that burned in his chest. His motorcycle, his dignity, his life, everything was being avenged in that moment. He clenched his fists, feeling the strength of his own resilience. Agent Silva, with impressive agility, typed on the keyboard, the warrants materializing on the screen. Judge, Captain, the warrants are ready. Just your signature, Judge. Helena picked up the pen, her hand firm, and signed each document with unshakable determination. Every stroke was a blow against corruption, a promise that justice, however slow, would always prevail. Warrants issued. Captain, you may give the order. Beatriz nodded, her voice resonating with authority. Raid teams, advance. Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo and Councilman Ricardo Mendez. Repeat, advance. Udi, at Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo's residence, the night was silent. He was in his private office, frantically trying to erase digital traces and hide documents. Zay's prepaid cell phone, which he had discarded, was a threat. News of the operation at the mechanic shop and auto parts store had reached him through his corrupt contacts, and panic was beginning to set in. He knew the net was closing. Suddenly, the front door was breached with a crash. Police, hands on your heads! Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo, you are under arrest! Carlos Eduardo froze, the mouse in his hand. He turned to see a tactical team invading his house, weapons drawn. In front, Sergeant Delta with a serious face. The chief of police tried to feign innocence, a cynical smile forced onto his lips. "What is this? A bad joke. I am Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo. We know who you are, Chief of Police, and we have an arrest warrant. You are being arrested for active and passive corruption, money laundering, and racketeering. Hands on your head now." Sergeant Delta left no room for negotiation. Carlos Eduardo felt his blood run cold. The arrogance that defined him crumbled in an instant. He slowly raised his hands, his face pale. As he was handcuffed, his eyes swept the room, searching for an escape, a justification, but found only the cold, professional gaze of the agents. Simultaneously, in Councilman Ricardo Mendez's luxurious penthouse, the scene repeated itself. Team Gamma, with military precision, stormed the apartment. Ricardo Mendez was on the phone, his voice agitated, trying to coordinate the destruction of evidence. "Councilman Ricardo Mendez, you are under arrest. Hands on your head." Mendez dropped the phone, the sound of the device shattering on the floor, echoing in the silence. He turned, shock plastered across his face. "This is absurd. You can't do this. I am a public official." "Your public affairs are over, Councilman. We have evidence of your connection to embezzlement, money laundering through Alpha Consulting Services, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." Sergeant Gamma recited the rights, while other agents were already searching the premises. In a few minutes, both men, once untouchable in their web of power and corruption, were handcuffed. News of their arrests reverberated in the command room. Base Delta, target contained. Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo arrested. We are initiating the search and seizure at the residence. We found a safe hidden behind a painting, awaiting forced entry. Base Gamma, target contained. Councilman Ricardo Mendez arrested. The laptop he was using is open, and there's a folder named Confidential Projects. We are sealing everything. Judge Helena and Captain Beatrice exchanged a look of contained satisfaction. It was just the beginning, but a powerful beginning. The downfall of the two pillars of corruption would send a clear message to all others involved. Agent Silva, who had continued to work on Guto's laptop, made a new discovery. "Captain, Judge, on Guto's laptop in the Confidential Projects folder that Team Gamma mentioned, there's a series of encrypted emails, and the recipient is an address we couldn't immediately identify, but the sender's name is The Architect. And the messages talk about new strategies for the bridge project and ensuring Dr. Almeida's approval." "The Architect," the judge murmured, her mind already working on the implications. It was a code name, an even higher link in the chain, and the mention of Dr. Almeida, the Secretary of Public Works, confirmed his active participation. The castle of corruption was even larger and more complex than they had imagined. Captain Beatrice picked up the radio. "Sergeant Delta, Sergeant Gamma, look for anything that could link the Architect to the Chief of Police or the Councilman. Diaries, notes, anything. And Agent Silva, prioritize the decryption of those emails. We need to know who the Architect is and what their role is." The night was still young, and the tide of justice, which had turned with the Chief of Police's arrest, now advanced with full force. The cries of despair from the corrupt were now a terrified silence, and the light of truth, merciless and relentless, was about to bathe each of the darkest secrets. The battle was far from over, but victory now was not just a distant hope. It was an increasingly palpable certainty. And in the hearts of the judge and the captain, determination only grew, fueled by the certainty that justice would be served, no matter the cost. The command room, once a whirlwind of adrenaline with the arrests of Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo and Councilman Ricardo Mendez, now breathed an air of bittersweet victory. The initial euphoria gave way to renewed tension, to a silence charged with expectation. Judge Helena and Captain Beatrice knew they had cut two rotten branches, but the root of corruption still hid in the shadows, deeper and more dangerous than they imagined. The Architect. The codename echoed in everyone's minds. A ghost, now taking on the contours of a real threat. Agent Silver, with an almost supernatural concentration, delved into the encrypted emails from Guto's laptop. Each deciphered line of code was a step towards unraveling the identity behind the pseudonym. His fingers flew across the keyboard, sweat dripping down his forehead, as the screen projected sequences of characters that, little by little, transformed into words, into phrases, into secrets. The bluish light of the monitor reflected in his glasses, revealing the intensity of his search. Meanwhile, at the residences of the recently arrested search and seizure teams worked tirelessly. Sergeant Delta, at the Chief of Police's house, had forced open the hidden safe. Inside, not just piles of cash and jewelry, but also diaries, notebooks, and a flash drive. One of the notebooks, leather-bound, contained meticulous annotations, dates, values, and repeatedly the name ACM. Next to references to Bridge Project and fund release, the acronym, still a mystery, seemed to be the key to the next level. In the councilman's penthouse, Sergeant Gamma and his team scoured the confidential projects folder on the laptop. In addition to the emails, they found a series of digital documents, detailed spreadsheets of inflated costs for the Freedom Bridge, falsified material inspection reports, and most shocking, an informal organizational chart. In it, the Chief of Police and the councilman were in intermediate positions, and at the top, above everyone, an empty circle with the inscription, The Architect. On one side, an arrow pointed to Dr. Almeida, the Secretary of Public Works, with the note, Executor. On the other, an arrow to ACM, described as the financier. The connection between the discoveries was beginning to form. "Judge, Captain!" Agent Silver's voice broke the tense silence. "I got it. The Architect's emails to Guto and Councilman Mendez, they detail the Freedom Bridge scheme. Costs inflated by 300%, use of low-quality materials, and a payment schedule for shell companies. And in every email, the Architect mentions the need for final cabinet approval. And there's a signature at the end of one of the most recent emails. Sincerely, ACM. It's the same acronym Sergeant Delta found in the Chief of Police's safe." Judge Helena felt a shiver run down her spine. ACM. The name, or initials, seemed to dance on the tip of her tongue, almost recognizable. Cabinet. ACM. War Agent Silver cross-referenced that acronym with all high-ranking names in the City Hall, the state government, and even influential businessmen who participated in major projects in recent years. "I want a list of everyone who fits those initials." Captain Beatrice, with the tactical map now illuminated with new points of interest, picked up the radio. "Sergeant Delta, Sergeant Gamma. The acronyms ACM and Cabinet are crucial. Look for any document, diary or call record that contains these references, and the Chief of Police's flash drive, Delta. I need it analyzed urgently. There might be more information there." News of the Chief of Police's and the councilman's arrests had already spread like wildfire. At Dr. Almeida's house, the Secretary of Public Works, panic was palpable. He tried to call the Architect, but the calls went unanswered. His contacts, once so solicitous, now dodged him. He knew he was next on the list. He began burning documents in a fireplace, destroying hard drives, but time was running out. Paranoia consumed him, his eyes scanning the street through the window, awaiting the inevitable. Jose da Silva, in the secure room, watched the updates on the monitor, his eyes welling up. With each new discovery, each name exposed, he felt justice approaching, not just for him, but for all who had been robbed and humiliated by this corruption network. His old motorcycle, his symbol of resistance, was being avenged. Agent Silva, with a muffled cry of triumph, turned to the judge and the captain. "Judge, Captain, I found it. CM, it's the mayor, Antonio Carlos Moreira. He is the architect." The encrypted emails were sent from the City Hall server from a secondary email address he used, and the call records from Councilman Mendes's cell phone showed dozens of calls to Mayor Antonio Carlos Moreira's personal number, many of them right after the cabinet meetings mentioned in the emails. A heavy silence fell over the room. The mayor. The man who presented himself as the paladin of morality, the city's leader, was the mastermind behind it all. The magnitude of the betrayal was overwhelming. Judge Helena closed her eyes for an instant, the cold fury transforming into steely determination. That man, who had promised to serve the people, was using his position to plunder public coffers, building his fortune on the ruins of trust and decency. Captain Beatrice took a deep breath, her voice firm and laden with authority. "Agent Silva, prepare arrest warrants for Mayor Antonio Carlos Moreira and the Secretary of Public Works, Dr. Almeida. Include search and seizure warrants for their residences and, especially, for the Mayor's office and the Department of Public Works. I want all evidence sealed and protected. Sergeant Delta, Sergeant Gamma, prepare your teams. The next target is the Mayor's office, and this time the fall will be monumental. We will leave no stone unturned." The night advanced, but the darkness would not be able to hide the truth for another instant. The castle of corruption, built on lies and embezzlement, was about to collapse completely, and the light of justice, merciless and relentless, threatened to expose the most powerful and darkest name of all. The battle was far from over, but victory now was not just a distant hope. It was an increasingly palpable certainty, a bittersweet taste in the mouths of the judge and the captain. Mayor Antonio Carlos Moreira would be confronted not just with the law, but with the silent fury of two women he had fatally underestimated. The tide of justice, which had turned with the chief of police's arrest, now advanced with full force, ready to sweep away the last and most powerful pillar of corruption. The night, once an accomplice to secrets and shadows, now became a silent witness to the downfall. In the mayor's office, the air still vibrated with the echo of Antonio Carlos Moreira's shouts, his impotent fury dissipating down the corridor as he was escorted away. For Judge Helena and Captain Beatrice, however, the mayor's arrest was not the end, but the opening of a new and more complex phase of the battle. That secret compartment, revealed behind the imposing bookshelf, held not just money and jewels, symbols of greed, but a far more dangerous object, a leather-bound diary. Judge Helena picked up the diary with gloves, her touch reverent, almost fearful, before the power those pages might contain. Each entry, written in elegant but treacherous handwriting, was another thread in the vast web of corruption. Secret meetings, names of shell companies, bribe amounts, and most shocking, a meticulous record of payments to other influential politicians and businessmen. The network extended far beyond the walls of City Hall, infiltrating the spheres of power in the city and possibly the state. Chief of Police Carlos Eduardo, with his flash drive, had been merely the tip of the iceberg. The mayor, the architect, was the main body, but the diary revealed the deep roots and multiple tentacles that spread out. The days that followed were filled with intense activity. The architect's diary became the epicenter of an unprecedented investigation. Every name, every date, every transaction was meticulously investigated. Politicians, businessmen, influential figures who considered themselves above the law saw their names exposed, their fortunes questioned, their empires crumbling. The wave of arrests and investigations spread like a tsunami, reaching the highest echelons of power. Helena and Beatrice together faced the fury of the powerful, the veiled threats, the attempts to discredit their work. But the force of truth, combined with the unshakable determination of mother and daughter, was greater. Public opinion, once skeptical, now united in support of the cleansing that was underway. The small injustice on the road, which seemed an isolated incident, had transformed into the spark that ignited deeply rooted corruption. Years passed. The city, once suffocated by the shadow of corruption, breathed purer air. New leaders emerged, committed to transparency and ethics. Judge Helena, with her wisdom and integrity, continued to be a beacon of justice, while Captain Beatriz, now a respected figure feared by criminals, rose through the ranks, leading new battles against organized crime. José da Silva's old motorcycle, which had been the catalyst for everything, was restored and kept as a symbol, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of justice are born from the smallest injustices. The story of the judge and the captain, the mother and daughter who dared to challenge the system, became a legend, a testament to the power of courage and the law. And so the city learned that, no matter how dark the night, the light of justice will always find a way to shine.